Okay, let's talk about spacing, what it is and what it means to you. Spacing is one of those things that some people have a hard time with. I think they have a bit of a hard time getting their heads wrapped around what exactly it is. One thing about animation is there's a lot of these principles um, that you kind of have to keep juggling around in your head at all times as you're working. And, new animators, I think, have a hard time with this. I know I did when I was first starting out. One of the things that happens is, some of these principles are explained in a very rudimentary way, which is good. You want it simple so you can understand it, but then it's not extrapolated out into like a more real world setting or a production setting where you would come across one of these principles or apply it in, like a working example. So that's what we're going to do here is we're going to start off with a simple example to show you illustrate what spacing is. And then we're going to take it a little further into an animated file. And you can see where it would come up in kind of a day-to-day situation. So let's go ahead and we're going to create just a polysphere. Let's scale it up a little. We're going to give it a material. And then we're just going to color this red just so it's a little easier to see. We're going to shade the scene. We're going to go to my work setup. Front view is good. Shade it. And what we're going to do is we're going to move this guy over here. We're going to save a key. And we're going to go to end frame of 30. Oops. We're going to save another key over here. Now, if you look at the curve, we're basically just moved it in X. We currently have a linear interpolation happening between these two keyframes. And if we play it back, it's just a straight linear move. And now there's this little tool here called the Arc Tracker. I'm going to launch that, and I'm going to move it over to my dock by hitting this dock button. Okay, hit undock and then dock it. Must have thought it was already docked. What Arc Tracker is, it's a plugin from Creative Crash, and Spencer Jones is the author of this little Mel script. What it does basically is it tracks your object and will have a little indicator at every frame to show you what your spacing is, and you get a visual representation of it. So if you want to install this, come to the website, creativecrash.com, Maya Downloads, scripts-plugins. We'll probably have this information in the DVD in a text file, or something like that, and have the information on how to install it. Basically download it. It has a few files in a zip format, and then you put the file in your user docs Maya version of Maya you're running scripts folder, and then you open up Maya, and then type in this Arc Tracker and the Mel command line. I went ahead and did that, and I dragged the command to my shelf so I would have it. It also comes with an icon for it. That's a PNG file. So when you add this, come to icon name and click on this little folder icon, and it'll pop up the location of where your icons are. So when you open up the zip file, copy the Arc Tracker ico.png and paste it in this path. Your user path documents Maya 2012. That's what you're using, prefs icons. And then once it's in here, open this folder back up, select the icon, and then you'll have it on your shelf, and then hit Save All Shelves. So then you click it and it pops up that window, and you can choose to dock it or undock it, whatever you feel works for you. So now what you do is we're going to add this object to our list, and we're going to create the trail. And here you can see these little indicators. Basically, for every frame, it drops one of these indicators at wherever the origin is of this object. The origin is at the center, so wherever the center hits on, the position of the center of the object is on each frame, it drops this little locator. And so what spacing is, it's the distance from one frame to the next that your object is traveling. And basically you wrap that all up overall, the entire sequence or scene file, and that's your spacing for the scene for that object. So if we modify this a little bit, let's just go into the graph editor on the Translate X, and we're going to add some flat tangents. So what's going to happen here is now as the sphere moves along, you can see here that we're going to make that a little smaller since we're using the front window here. When I update this tracking bar, you'll see as it starts to move on, these little indicators are going to be grouped really close together, meaning really small spacing. And then as it moves on, they're going to get wider apart, and then as it comes to an end, the spacing is going to get tighter and tighter. So let's recreate the trail, and then you can see the example of what I was just describing. Here we have, the little indicators really tight together for these particular frames. So it starts to move slowly. As it picks up speed, the spacing gets wider. So the farther the spacing is, the wider the spacing is, the faster an object's going to move. The tighter the spacing is, the slower it's going to move. So, and you can see the representation of the curve here as it travels along X. The flatter the curve, the less change, the tighter the spacing. The steeper the curve, the bigger the change in position, so the bigger the spacing is. And a lot of times, when a student has, or a fledgling animator has an animation they're working on, they're really kind of moving there's a lot of keyframes, and it's pretty, complex move. The spacing, now let's redraw that. You'll see a situation where the spacing between certain keys is very uneven. And then it'll change abruptly. So if we create it, so you can see here is really tight here, and it starts off pretty even in these first few frames, and then all of a sudden it pops to this frame here. You can see the pop as I scrub through. See how slowly it's moving, and then pop, and that'll cause a pop in your animation that may or may not be obvious. But what it will do, especially if it's not super obvious, is it'll cause an anomaly in your animation that may be hard to figure out what's causing it. You'll be in a situation where you're animating something, and say it's a walk cycle, and you're like, there's something that's just not, something's wrong with this walk. I can't quite figure out what it is, whether it's with the arm, the leg, the pelvis, whatever the case may be. And then you track it using a tool like Arc Tracker to see the spacing, and you'll see a situation where you're getting this pop in there. And like I said, it might be just a real subtle pop, but it's enough to kind of take away that feeling of fluid movement. So once you go back and you fix that, the fluidity will return and really make the animation shine. So that's basically what spacing is in a real simple example. And if we go to, we're going to open up another animation file with a walk cycle in it, and I'll basically illustrate what I was just talking about there. So let's pop that open.